break up
windows
protests.
at McDonald's. They're dumping over garbage cans. And they are very angry again and hostile. We're seeing more clashes with other protesters telling them to stop because they're giving everyone a bad name. None of the protesters, the legitimate protesters down here, want any of this kind of action, and they are very angry.
So right now, knocking at the newspapers.
Megan, any sign yet of police trying to track them down?
No sign of police anywhere. They're going like... They're breaking the bank window here at U.S. Bank. We got to get out of here. We're going to run up the street because if they see us, they attack us. And so we're keeping a safe distance away from them.
Several police officers have told us because they were assigned to control the protest crowds, they weren't allowed to break ranks and to stop the black bloc. So the group just continued destroying property for nearly an hour.
What's wrong with this picture? If the police are supposedly there to protect the public and property, then why? Why did state police, Seattle police, as well as the feds, stand back and allow the anarchists en masse to run around and throw bottles at police, cones, rocks, you name it, and assault private property as well as members of the general public? Because they needed someone to demonize the rest of the good demonstrators. Now, my friends, this is an old tactic throughout history. If you have opposition, you simply demonize them by creating your own crisis, your own massacre or terrorist bombing or incident, and then blaming it on your political opponents. When you have 50, 60,000 peaceful demonstrators out exposing the corruption, how do you neutralize them? Well, you simply send in your boys to create a crisis, to offer a solution. Now, we're not saying that local police knew what was going on. Certainly not. They just were following their orders, which is frightening in and of itself, to let a bunch of anarchists, 30 or 40 of them tops, run around and burn and break things because they were ordered to do so.
It's hard for most people to witness chaos and destruction, but Detective Donnie Lowe says as a police officer at the scene,
I was embarrassed.
Lowe and his fellow officers were under orders to hold their ground last Tuesday when protesters blocked access to the convention center. He says it was painful to watch the crowd harass delegates and not be able to help them. He wasn't even allowed to catch the crooks looting downtown businesses.
I watched this guy loot Nike Town, sit in the window of Nike Town. At some point in time, the employees of Nike Town were chased out, and they came running to us for assistance, and what we wasn't allowed to do anything.
Detective Lowe has, well, half the answer right. He's got half the picture in his hands. Certainly, it's horrible, it's inexcusable that city leaders under the control of the federal government in Seattle would instruct the police not to apprehend criminals while they were engaging in crimes publicly. Crimes like robbery, arson, and assault. That makes the police chief, the mayor, the Justice Department, the Delta Force, the FBI, you name them, running this operation guilty as accomplices. But in a second, Detective Lowe falls for the old trick we've been talking so much about. Problem, reaction, solution. He says, you know, we were attacked out there for a day. But, you know, later the city got it together and we went ahead and declared the emergency. Why, we had the no protest zone. Yeah, half the city. Why, the civil emergency was needed. And we finally, you know, we got to get tough on them. Yeah, you got to get tough on all the peaceful demonstrators that were shutting down the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and now when people think of protesters across the country, especially city leaders, city managers and others say, boy, we better crack down, we better ban protest here too. And they're passing ordinances across the nation to implement emergencies whenever they feel like it. And the federal government is rubbing its hands together. All started by 30 to 40 anarchists running around, burning and beating and smashing and stealing. And the police, like dogs at the end of a chain, a Rottweiler you've been slapping, suddenly had their leashes released, and with wanton abandon, they rampaged out in a berserk fashion and attacked old ladies, store owners, you name it. And then they got to ship everybody to the FEMA center. That's right. FEMA was helping during this learning process for everyone.
I think Our biggest problem here was leadership within this department refused to take appropriate actions when it was clearly necessary.
If you thought the anarchists who commandeered a privately owned downtown building were out of town now, well, think again. As Cairo 7 Eyewitness News reporter Christina McKenna has found out, they're still here and still living rent-free.
Susan, when these anarchists moved out of the building behind me on Saturday, a lot of people thought they should have been headed to jail. Instead, it turns out a lot of them just headed around the corner, and they're now living in a building right over here where they're enjoying electricity, hot water, and heat, all rent-free.
Saturday afternoon was a celebration here. 7 days after they commandeered this downtown building, anarchists walked away without a word from police.
It feels to me like we won.
And at least some are still winning. As part of the deal to get them to surrender this building, anarchists were offered housing just around the corner at the same price. The building is owned by the Low Income Housing Institute, a private nonprofit that is in large part funded by the city and is now working with the city to house the anarchists.
First of all, with criminal trespassing, that was me or you or the average person out in the street, we'd be in jail.
John Satoli can't believe the anarchists aren't in jail now. As a lawful tenant in the building the anarchists had seized, he was locked out of his packaging and shipping business for a week during his busiest season. Satoli can't believe he's now contemplating bankruptcy, and the people who put them there have paid no consequence at all.
They walked away. They walked away, and the city of Seattle, low-income housing, moved them across the street on me and yours taxpayers' dollars.
So why didn't the police department arrest the anarchists when they moved out of that building? Well, that's a question a lot of people are asking, especially since the West Precinct is just down the block. We asked the police department this weekend. We asked them again today. They still haven't returned our call with an answer.
Instead of eviction, police asked housing activists to negotiate with demonstrators. Sharon Lee of the Low Income Housing Institute convinced the protesters to voluntarily leave the building, in part by offering them temporary housing in a private nonprofit shelter around the corner.
The riotous behavior I saw was by the Seattle Police Department, the Washington State Patrol, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
From the city's standpoint, we had security, and at least 20 agencies were involved. We had the lead, but clearly the Secret Service, the FBI, all of the state and local agencies dealing with security, the Port of Seattle, ATF. And a lot of work from traveling to Geneva to looking at the NATO conference in Washington, D.C., trying to do the best they could to understand what both the threat was and then how to plan to do it.
From the start to the finish and even after, the anarchists were housed. They were protected. They were not to be arrested by Seattle police. It's a staged, managed operation. After the anarchists had put on their display for the news cameras, the authorities had all they needed to rationalize a total suspension of civil as well as human rights publicly in front of everyone's eyes. They started declaring that people couldn't have banners or posters or even stickers or buttons on their clothes against the WTO. Anyone who got in their way was arrested and shipped to a FEMA center, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. In direct violation of Posse Comitatus, had Delta Force on the ground from day one of the demonstrations and protest, continually integrating the local, state, county, and city police under federal command. This should be a giant red flag for any American concerned about their God-given rights and their freedom in this country.
That WTO stuff is one of the most telling things I've ever seen. I was like, wow, that's really what they do. They really do that. And then but it makes sense. Like, engineering like that has been done throughout military history, right? I mean, haven't they always done things like that? I mean, there's...
I wasn't here, but now I am. I've teleported over.
I made him sit next to me. I get lonely.
Look at this guy over here. So, let's talk about your comedy career. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, you've got to be now one of the most famous people in comedy, not just in the current times, but overall, you're in the pantheon now, the greats.
Well, that's ridiculous.
No.
There's a lot of great comics.
People don't get excited about The Office about many people, buddy. And all over, folks talk about you.
Well, that's so nice of that.
I know you don't want to hear about yourself all day, but it's fun to hear that your comedy's really... Look, you're growing exponentially.
Well, I think I'm definitely working at it. I'm doing a lot of stand-up, and I love it. It's so much fun. I think that's the key to the whole thing for me. It's just, I really enjoy it.
Second show, Austin. I present to you one of my funniest pals, the host of the Joe Rogan Experience. See how loud you can get when I say the name Joe Rogan, everybody.
I enjoy writing. I enjoy creating new stuff. I enjoy putting it together. I enjoy making people laugh, and I enjoy people getting like feeling like they got their money's worth. I want it to be a good exchange. You know, it means a lot to me that people have a good time. It's very, very important. Like, I never take it lightly.
There's no roof on Earth, and we're flying through space. Yeah, you should be your pants all the time. Like, it's ridiculous that doesn't even get brought up. We're on a ball that's spinning 1,000 miles an hour in a circle, and it's floating in the sky next to a giant fireball that's 1,000,000 times bigger than Earth. And no one thought, oh, the sun's up. That's a floating f***ing fireball that wants to kill you. It's trying to give you cancer. If you stare at it, you go blind.
Do you think that the world's gonna collapse?
Well, it's a designed...
Doesn't everybody always think the world's going to collapse?
Sure, because sometimes civilization does collapse.
Yeah.
In different periods, and so that's kind of a racial memory. It is so cold-blooded how it's all been actuaried out. It's to consolidate power. It's to... And it's not for American interest. It's just that we have been under the heavier engineering in a lot of other countries. That's why things are being tested out. The empire tests things out here.
Are we like the Columbus, Ohio for the empire?
I think so.
You know Columbus, Ohio, where Brian's from? He said that when he grew up there, he would get products. They would test products, like new cereals and shit. It didn't exist anywhere else in the country. They tested out in Columbus.
Well, that's it. The elite can use these Machiavellian tactics and social engineering and propaganda and focus groups to have control. But in the process of putting us into that, it automatically dumbs us down and destroys the civilization they live in as well. So it's almost like cheating by the establishment, is that it is so set up at the top, but they don't run all the chaos. They more like steer it and manipulate it, and then have learned how to guide it.
Like in what way are they guiding it? Is it possible that it's just capitalizing on flaws in human nature, flaws in our society?
There's already major flaws in major currents. It's like Caesar said, there's a tide in the affairs of men when take up the flood leads on to fortune. And so, yes. And so they're basically surfing this. So I agree with you. It is this big chaos theory. It's out of control, but they know people.
It always drives me crazy about all this Illuminati shit. How do I know it's just not one crazy old, you know, like Howard Hunt type dude who's like writing a bunch of wacky shit. But what's really going on is not that. He's like a nutty dude.
I'll tell you how we know.
Going on.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
We are now facing a common challenge. And the challenge is how to build a world order for the first time in history on a global basis.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
Is this global governance at last? Is it one world, the central bankers in charge? But aren't we all just living and dying for what the central banks do?
Of course we are. We are absolutely slaves to central banks.
There are hundreds of books like Tragedy and Hope,
right,
and I mean just so many others written by the top think tank heads, the RAND Corporation.
And what do they believe?
Eco-Science, written by the current White House science czar. Well, I think talking about the bad stuff keeps it from happening.
I think a lot of it does.
If we deal with it, because I just knew, because I had all these NSA whistleblower types, mainly telecom people coming to me saying, man, you have no idea how bad it is. There's microphones in the TV boxes. There's hubs. It's Project Echelon, and so it was actually a lot of it was out then. It's just that Snowden released a whole lot more. But separately from that, what gets you the most excited today?
God, you just switched gears on me, man. Microphones and the cable boxes, the world's doomed. But what gets you happy? It's fun, Alex Jones, isn't it? If you have good friends, you have a good life, right? I mean, isn't that what life is about? Just enjoying enjoying